Hey, everybody. Happy Veterans Day. Welcome to the, wow, I almost forgot. I almost did the business podcast, the Doug Thompson podcast. I forgot which one I was doing today. I did one for Tanium, the company I work for a little bit earlier. So this is the Doug Thompson podcast. I am the host, and I'm joined today with Marvin Storm. Marvin, I apologize. I am having all kinds of reading problems today. So Marvin, tell us about yourself while I get a drink of water.
Well, it's great to be here. I just love chatting about kind of my core competency nowadays, and that is, kind of showing the path and highlighting what people can do to kind of optimize the value of their business when they get to a point in stepping out. And I've had a couple of exits along the way, and some of those have been really great and some not so great. And I've just learned a lot about what the individual should be doing, to eventually, someday, almost everyone, unless you plan on living forever, are going to have to step away and sell their business or pass it on to someone they know or an employee or family member or someone. And they're going to have to step away from their business. And the amount of money they put in their pocket when that time happens is very controllable. And you can have a huge influence on that if you do the right things.
When I was talking to you about the podcast several weeks ago, I had not even thought about that. We had a discussion about sort of an exit strategy, and I've got I got a corporate job that I'm doing now, which I don't plan to exit anytime soon. But we got the podcast, and I didn't even think about the podcast, just leaving it. So as you build up an audience for these other things, there's a way that your listeners and all find value. And so you gave me some things to think about, and I really appreciated that conversation. But it also sounds like you've got, you through your career, we talked about early on, you can go check him out on LinkedIn, but you've got a lot of experiences forming something, stepping away, going to do something else. So tell us sort of how you came to where you are today.
Well, it's an interesting, I think everyone has kind of an origin story and, a career path that kind of winds its way through, and, you hit your peaks and your valleys, and sometimes you get off of the path into the weeds, and you got to kind of climb back on the path. And like a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, I've had that type of experience in my career. I got my start, in public accounting. I got my degree in accounting and went to work for a national firm, what is now called Deloitte, one of the big four. Back then, when I got my start, it was the big eight. And I spent some time there and was playing pickup basketball every Tuesday nights for several years, and bumped into a few guys that I knew and became really good friends with one of them. And before you knew it, we were, talking and chatting and turning in our resignations and deciding to strike out on our own, and rented a small office with 2 desks and 2 phones, and the desks faced each other, and we were in business, and spent nearly 10 years together. And we built that business up from a small office to, almost 2 floors of a downtown office building, and 60, 70 people on the payroll. And we were kind of in the right place at the right time. At the time, I thought I was pretty cool. I thought I kind of had the Midas touch, and I was just really on top of my game. But after the winds kind of changed and the economy took a dip, and the market became more competitive, and the business kind of drew up or kind of went away, all of a sudden I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, and but we worked that out.
Yeah.
We were able to reposition it and, grow it again. And eventually my partner was a little bit older than I was, and his objectives changed, and he kind of wanted to go one direction, and I had different ideas. And so we just met together in a local city park and sat at a picnic table and talked our way through of how we were going to move forward. And we decided that it was time that we just, exited the business. And that's what we did.
And that was your first one. That's what started all this. This was your first one.
That's what got it going. And it was a great experience. Young guy, and, your mid 20s, and and just getting started, with a new family and big mortgage, and doing well, then not so well, then doing well again, and then leaving that business and getting started in a whole new industry, whole different orientation, and starting from scratch all over again. And that's been, every 10 years or so in my career, it's been kind of the evolution, is to, get something started and then spin it out, or, step away and go do something else.
Why do you think if this is a pattern that repeats itself, what is sort of the common thread, or why do you think it's about sort of this? Is it the business cycle? Is it just simply you as a growth perspective? You've gotten what you wanted to accomplish out of it. Now it's time to go do something else.
Well, I think it's a combination of things. For me, I'll speak from my personal perspective. Um, I am entrepreneurial. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My father had his own business. That was a small town in the Midwest where I grew up, and I saw, kind of ground level, in the trenches lifestyle that an entrepreneur, followed. And my father was his own boss, and he did different things and was successful at most of them, not all of the things that he figured out and launched. He had patents and different types of businesses, and he did very well for most of his career. And I sort of saw that. And although, he grew up where, getting a college education kind of wasn't the norm. And so he never actually graduated from high school. And he started at the bottom and built up to where he had his own businesses and then several businesses. And he always wanted, his kids to have something a little bit better, and wanted us to get an education. And so that's kind of the path that I decided to go down. And that's why I got my degree, and, started off in the accounting world. Actually, in college, I started a couple of businesses in college, and one of them took off much faster than I thought. And I almost had to drop out of school. I had to make a decision whether I wanted to, continue with this business, which should probably not have been a bad idea at the time.
Yeah.
No, looking back and having the benefit of hindsight, I was really at the beginning of in a service industry. I had a maid service,
Mm.
and I would hire young co-eds to go knock on the doors of all the large apartment buildings where, guys stayed. There was generally 4 to 6 guys in an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And for $1 a week, I would clean their apartment. And back in those days, minimum wage was in the less than a couple of dollars. And so I just worked it out. If I'm getting $6 to clean the apartment and it's going to take an hour and I'm paying less than $2, well, that's pretty good margins.
Mm-hmm.
And what I didn't anticipate, though, was once the guys got a maid, they became really slob. It was a slob factor, but it was slob squared.
I
And
know some women which would say that happened when they got married too.
that's true. That's true. But guys in college, they really turned into real
Yeah.
slobs. And so it wasn't taking an hour; it was taking 2 hours plus, and but it still was going fast. And I look back now, and there's a lot of maid services around, independent maid service, franchise-based maid services, corporate-oriented maid services. And I was really on the cutting edge of that. And I often thought if I'd have stayed in that business, I could have probably hit a home run with that. And that's why I took my first accounting classes, because I had money just coming out of my ears. I mean,
Yeah.
I had hundreds of apartments to clean. I even had local homeowners calling up wanting their homes cleaned,
Yeah.
and so I was on to something there. But
Yeah.
no, I stuck with my schooling and took some accounting classes, and then went on an internship and ended up being an accountant and starting down that road. So that's kind of the early version
Yeah.
one of my entrepreneurial journey. And then after being in accounting for a few years, I met my co-founder, and we launched off into, starting from scratch a new business.
So when did you start realizing that, as people exit and, because I've known people that have left corporate life and they had a bankroll and they thought they were going to do that, but it didn't last too long. They didn't really plan that well out of it, or they've had a business running and they got bored and they wanted to go do something else, and they just said, look, it's here, take it, and I'm gonna go do something else. And I don't think they got the maximum value out of it. So that's actually two questions. So one of them, how do you prepare to exit, like to go into entrepreneurship? What's the advice that you might give? And the second one is that when you're exiting to retire or to start something new, what are the things you look for?
Well, two really different thought processes.
Mm-hmm.
For those that are in the corporate life, one thing I've always been amazed with in this country is that the school system really teaches people and is really oriented to educate people and to preach the dogma of getting a job. That's
Mm-hmm.
all they talk about. You get an education so that you are marketable and that you can go get a job, that you'll interview when you get to the end of your college career, and you hope to, be attractive to someone because you got good grades or whatever, and then you'll start your career as an employee. And then generally, that works out fine for a lot of people. But along that employee path, there's dissatisfaction, there's all the politics that go on, and promotions that are, generated by not necessarily performance, but by who you know, or being in the right place at the right time. And then there's corporate, downsizing and economic downturns and mergers and acquisitions and, people getting laid off. And somewhere along that path, a huge swath of this employee workforce out there decides that the grass is greener on the other side of the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to make that migration from working for the man until doing something of their own. So there's this process, there's this transition between employee to entrepreneur. And that process is, you have to kind of do the right things to optimize that transition so that you have somewhat of a safety net if things don't work out. And there are certain things that you do along that path that tremendously increase the probability that you're going to be successful. And then after you get involved in your own business, if you manage to be successful and you're able to grow and scale that business, then there's going to be another exit. There's only a couple of things that can happen to a business when you really think about it. Most people aren't going to live forever. So that means that option is off of the table, that you're not going to be able to, for the next 50, 100 years, run that business. So then you got to think about, well, who is going to run it if I'm not there? So it's either going to be someone that that's internal to you, internal in the company. That means family that's operating in the business. That means an employee or a management team, or maybe a business partner. So it's someone inside of the company. That's an option for an exit. If it isn't those, then you have to look at, well, then it's somebody outside the company, someone you don't know. It's a third party. That third party may be someone like you. It may be an investor group, a management team, another company, but it's someone that you don't know that you're going to exit. And I guess there's a third option that no one really wants to consider, and that's you're going to liquidate your business and wind it down and just quit doing it one day, sell off the assets, or be forced into selling off the assets because you're forced into bankruptcy. So you don't want to talk about those options necessarily.
Yeah, that's the bad.
So there's these two options, inside and outside. And if it's outside, which is 90%, 95% probably of all business exits out there, are going to be to someone that you don't know, then there is really a process in place for you to be able to optimize and to maximize the value that you're going to get for your business and the amount of money that is going to go into your pocket instead of off to paying off debt or to pay Uncle Sam and those type of things that have to be addressed. And if you do the right things, if you follow the right process, if you start the process early enough, you can have I can tell you it is dramatically uh, different on if you just show up, because the sad fact is that most people, and I think this is endemic of entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs uh, love the chase. They love the excitement of actually managing the process and running a business. And because they're entrepreneurial, they like to solve problems and they like to shoot from the hip. They just like that, you know, being faced with something in real time, assessing the situation, figuring out a solution, and then implementing that solution. There's a real rush of adrenaline and satisfaction in being able to do that over and over. And entrepreneurs who do that in a specific vertical, they become really good at what they do. They become the experts. And they have this natural aptitude and then eventually experience that allows them to really be at the top of their game. And they think that the exit's going to happen the same way. They're just going to arrive at a time where they're going to decide one day that now's the time. I'm either burned out, I want to go do something else, I want to retire. Maybe they went to the doctor, they got a bad diagnosis, they're not getting along with their partner, they're divorced, or whatever the situation, and they want to sell or exit their business. And they think they're just going to figure it out. And they're just going to do what they've always done. And things are just magically going to fall in place. And they're going to get more money than they ever thought they were going to get for their business. And it's all going to be in cash. And things are just going to be hunky dory. Unfortunately, the data does not support that type of scenario. In fact, there's a lot of research and surveys that have been done that for all the businesses that are listed for sale on an annual basis, over 80% never find a buyer. And out of those that do find a buyer, relatively few of them are actually able to get what they want for their business. And in some cases, positioning their business so it actually gets more. It's attractive enough to certain types of buyers that they'll really pay up for that type of business. And so, the point, I guess, that I want to emphasize here is that it isn't going to magically happen. If you're going to optimize your exit, it's probably going to take some forethought. It's going to take you doing certain things to be able to optimize that value. And if you do, you can do very well. If you don't, you may be a dollar short than you thought you were going to be, and not have the type of retirement or enough money to start your next venture that you thought you were going to have.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple things, and so one of them is the entrepreneurial mindset. I know a lot of them that, and we talked about reasons why they may want to exit or sell. One of them is they like that experience of building it from scratch and solving the problem. And then when it comes sort of that problem solving is day to day, then they get a bit bored and they're sort of looking for the next problem to solve. So it's not a bad thing. That's just simply the mindset, and they're very successful at what they do. So they may exit a lot, and they could use your, the things that you've got to make the most out of it to start again. And the second thing is you talked about the educational system. Seth Godin talks about it sort of being created to create factory workers. You had a sort of a skill set and you did that. Don Wettrick, I don't know if you've ever followed him or not, but he was a teacher and now he's sort of out. But he was teaching his kids entrepreneurial skills in class. He sort of created his own thing, and I talked to his class, and they were brilliant. That they had that mindset about going on and doing things. Not just simply getting a job or doing something. They were creating a business or something out of that, sort of like what you did in college. And I think in the current environment, we need more of that sort of thought process and teaching them some of the skills that you talked about.
Well, fortunately, I think there is a grassroots movement that is making its way, especially at the college level. You have entire entrepreneurial programs now. And in some of the, top colleges in the country, Stanford being the primary example, where they have an entrepreneurial program and they really focus on, giving the skills and inviting in professors that have had real life experiences. And, since they're located, Palo Alto, which is where Stanford is located, is right in the heart of Silicon Valley. and Sand Hill Road, where all the venture capitalists hang out, that founded Apple and Hewlett Packard and Google and all the others, are in that valley, the Silicon Valley there. There's a lot of access to capital and talent and people and and other colleges around the country, have and are starting entrepreneurial programs where they actually have a course of study where you can actually get a degree. And part of that process is starting your own business and learning how to, develop a plan, how to execute that plan, how to get funding, how to recruit people, how to do your financial projections and really understanding the life cycle of a business and how to scale a business.
Mhm.
And those are, I think it's changing, but at the elementary and high school level, uh, given the kind of the parochial uh, attitude, those things are very slow to change, and I think that's really sad.
It is because there's a lot of opportunity in sort of the services business or the things that we do every day, the small business that you will, they don't like your dad, they don't necessarily need to go to college to have a business and run it and add value to the community and things like that. So I think, I'm with you on that. Is I would like to see more of this as a grassroots teaching this in the high school level, so that at least then they can determine, well, I've got these business ideas and I can do XYZ, rather than going to college and it's not for everybody.
Well, entrepreneurship is not for everybody because it takes a certain risk tolerance.
Well, oh yeah, I'll
It
come
takes
back
a
college. Yeah, entrepreneur. Yeah, that's the reason a lot of people don't go into it, is the risk tolerance and stuff of that as well.
yeah, and I think it's a mindset too. It is not an 8 to 5 job. I mean, I knew that growing up, and my father never worked 8 to 5. He worked
Mhm.
what needed to be done. That's what he worked, and he came home
Yeah,
when the job was done. And so I didn't have any rose-colored glasses on when I, launched out onto my own. But I think a lot of people, totally misinterpret or
yeah,
misunderstand the level of hard work and the stress that's involved with making payroll week after
yeah.
week.
Yeah, some people that have been out in the corporate world and had to work for the man, or however you want to describe it, they think, oh, I can be my own boss and I can get, I can do what I want. No, you can't. If you're doing it right, no, well, you can do what you want, but there's a lot of work that goes along with it. You're not going to be on the golf course every day, or fishing, or whatever you want to do.
You may get there one day, but it's not going
You
to take
may
a lot
get,
of work.
yeah, you have to work through that. It's like training for an endurance event. There's 6 months of what I call embracing the suck, because you just don't want to get out the workout stuff before you get to the actual race to go do things. So, I mean, life is like that. Anything that is worth achieving, there's work associated with it. Not everybody doesn't win the lottery.
No, that's a true statement. If you have a great idea and you have the ability to, buckle down and do the work, and you can stick with it long enough, generally it works out. Not always, but generally.
And then you just dust yourself off and you try again. If it, hey, what did you learn from it? Take the learnings and go on from there. So, what do you have a podcast as well? So tell the audience a little bit about that one. It sounds really, you talk to some really interesting people.
Well, my podcast really was kind of genesis in my last exit. My last exit was different than most of the others that I had in my career in that it involved outside capital. I brought in outside investors in order to scale and grow the business. And, it was a different environment, had different rules. Once you grow a business to that level, and you now have a board of directors you have to report to. Now I had a company that I wasn't the sole owner of, and the reporting to the board and being able to meet expectations on projections. And one thing uh, that I intuitively understood, I intellectually understood it, I should say, is that once you take in outside capital, especially if it's from a fund or institutional capital, in most cases, So let's talk about private equity. In most cases, private equity is simply a group of investors that have been recruited into a fund run by some general partners who go out and find businesses to invest in. That's why it's private equity. They invest their equity into acquiring businesses, and there's an expectation of a return on those invested funds. And generally, they have a time window. So when an investor comes into a private equity fund, the general partners will say, our fund has a life of 5 to 7 years or maybe 10 years. In that time window, we're going to liquidate all of the businesses that we invest in and return the money to you with a very attractive rate of return.
Mhm.
And so when you take private equity or an investment of that type, uh, the clock starts to run. And for that period of time, they may be looking at an exit in 3 to 5 years or maybe a little bit longer, but there's going to be a monetization event along there because they need to recognize the return. Because from the general partner's perspective, they want to show success, they want to show a certain rate of return so that when this fund closes down, they have a track record. They can go out and talk to those investors and recruit new investors because they were so good at with their first fund or their second fund that they'll be able to, not instead of raising, you know, $30 million in the fund, they'll be able to raise $300 million into the fund. And when they get done with that fund, then they're going to raise $1 billion. And so that's the game. That's the process. And so when you take money like that, I guess I intellectually understood that there was going to be a monetization event down the road. But when that time arrives, especially it arrives sooner than you think, and you have so much more that you want to do because things are really going now. You had the capital, you were able to execute,
Yeah.
you were able to fuel that growth, and things are going. And you're an entrepreneur, and you just can see so much more. And you're sitting in that board meeting, and they say, it's time. We need another year from now, 9 months from now. We need to tee this up to get ready for an exit. And so these are the things that you have to do. And I just
Yeah.
was not ready. But I understood, put on my big boy pants and, position the company. But because I hadn't been through that before and I was dealing with the board and I was dealing with these different dynamics, I did not optimize my exit from my perspective as much as I should. And so once I had a chance and I stepped over to the side of the road and I wasn't in the fast lane anymore, and I just got to thinking about, my career, all the things I'd done, and especially this last exit. And I said, there's probably a lot of other people out there that are along this path. They're had their first business, they're getting ready to exit, or maybe it's their second, or maybe it's a situation like I was where they have outside investors and they haven't been through that before. I bet there's a lot of people out there like that if they had some insight, they could probably do better for themselves. And so I said, I love podcasting. I'm just going to start a podcast. And so that's what I did. Instead of going out and talking to the actual people that had sold businesses, which was kind of my first thought, I decided I would, talk to the deal makers, the people that actually facilitated the exit. And these are the mergers and acquisition advisors, investment bankers, boutique investment banking firms, transaction attorneys, CPAs, business brokers, all these people that are involved in making deals happen, and have them bring their stories, their good stories, where things went really well, maybe really spectacularly well, or didn't go so well, and some really belly flops.
Mhm.
And they bring some really sad stories about how people lost it all on that last lap, where they just dropped the baton on the last lap, and the exit was very sad. And so the real concept of what I wanted to accomplish was just so that entrepreneurs and founders out there don't have to go through the learning experience and the pain themselves. They can listen to what other people did. And because I'm talking to people that do hundreds of deals in their careers, they bring the the best of their deals to the table that have the most learning, the most unique takeaways. And I've just gotten tremendous feedback from, people, entrepreneurs that saying, geez, I listened to that episode last week and I don't want to turn out like that guy. He sounded just like me. I don't want to that happen to me. I'm glad I listened to that episode. And there's just tons of stories like that. And they're unusual things that can happen and things you just wouldn't think about. And the end of the day, you're going to have that exit one day. And if you drop that baton on that last lap, either taking your money that you're going to invest in the next thing or your retirement, you don't want to drop it, especially if it's your retirement, because you just don't have that long of a runway. You better make sure that you do the right things in the right sequence, in the right order to be able to optimize that exit value.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, you've had quite the hero's journey with some, hills or valleys and peaks and you've taken all these learnings and stuff and are now sort of giving back to those that are on the road behind you, which really we all should be doing. If the world would be a lot better place if we were. So thanks for sharing those stories. And you've got a giveaway now, if I'm not mistaken. I think we talked about that. Can you sort of share that? And how people
I think that, those that are at some point in time going to be excellent, you should probably, subscribe to the podcast, because it's just 4 stories in every podcast, too good, too bad. And just go to wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever, or go to the website, businessexitstories.com, and subscribe there. And I have one thing I get a lot of feedback and thinking, kind of what's the process? What do I do? I just don't really know how to go about this. And so I've created this kind of downloadable PDF that you can download. You just go to businessexitstories.com /report, the numeral 2, report 2. And just download the report. I think you'll find it's a quick read. It's have some real interesting insights that anyone that has a business, that whether it's 5 years or 10 or next year you're going to be exiting, it'll be worth the read.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that, Marvin. You've given me some things to think about. I hope we've given the audience some things to think about. And go check Marvin's stuff out if you even have any inkling about starting something and exiting. So it's always good to have a guide to do that. And let's not drop the baton. Let's not be the men's Olympic relay team. To do that. So Marvin, thanks a lot.
Hang on to that baton, don't drop it. Yeah.
Yeah. Practice that exchange. So thanks a lot, Marvin.
All right. Thank you. Delightful. Enjoyed talking to you.